Okay, hello learners, how are we doing today? We have a question to answer in this video today. The question is, what is a decimal? I'm pretty sure we've heard that word. We might have even seen a decimal before, but I'd like to know what it is. Why do we have a decimal? So I want you to look at this number line that I've drawn. This number line represents my whole. It represents one whole. So I want you to think of your fractions, think of your understanding about wholes and fractions. Look at my number line, my whole. How many parts do you see? How many equal parts do you see in my whole? Well, I'm going to count the equal parts. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 equal parts. Okay, that's really important. When we're talking about a decimal, the decimal tells us that every whole has 10 equal parts. Okay, every whole has 10 equal parts. So, if this is 0, what is this as a fraction? If my whole has 10 equal parts, how many parts is this one? Well, it's 1 part out of my 10. It's 1/10 of my whole. How many parts is this one? Well, now we're at 2/10 of my whole. How many tenths is this one? Well, this is 3/10 of my whole. 3 parts out of my 10 equal parts that make up my whole. So I want you to pause the video and I'd like you to complete this number line, thinking in terms of tenths. So pause the video and let's complete the number line. Okay, welcome back. So let me see if my thinking checks out with your thinking of how you completed the number line. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10. This is 4/10. This is 5/10. This would be 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10. Now, when I'm getting to my whole, how many tenths equals one whole? 10/10. So I can represent my one whole as 10/10. 10 parts out of 10. All right. All a decimal does is it represents a fraction with denominator of 10. So a decimal is another way to show tenths. Okay? Every time we deal with a decimal, it's telling us that every whole is broken into 10 equal parts. So I can represent my tenths, my fraction, as a decimal. 1/10 is the same as 0.1. 2/10 is the same as 0.2. 3/10, 0.3. I'd like you to pause the video, and now I want you to write each fraction, each tenth fraction as a decimal. Okay, welcome back. Let's see if your thinking is the same as my thinking. 4/10, 0.4. 5/10, 0.5. 6/10, 0.6. 7/10, 0.7. 8/10, 0.8, 9/10, 0.9. And if I have 10/10, that's the same as 1 and 0/10. I just have one whole. I don't have another whole with tenths. I just have one whole, so it's one whole and 0 other tenths. Don't have it. Okay. Now, let's practice representing decimals as fractions. So, if I give you this decimal, 0.2, all the decimal tells us is our whole is broken into 10 equal parts. How many parts am I using? 2 of the 10, 2/10. So I can represent my decimal as a fraction. This is the same as 2/10. 0.2 is equal to 2/10. So if I want to draw 0.2, 2/10, I draw my whole. How many parts do I break my whole into? 10 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Each one of these is 1/10, right? Each part is 1/10 of the whole. How many parts am I using? I'm using 0.2 parts, or I'm using 2/10 of my whole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shade in 2/10. This represents 2/10, but also 0.2. Okay, practice another one. I have 0.6. So the decimal tells me every whole is divided equally into 10 parts. So how many parts of the whole do I have? I have 6 parts out of the 10. So 0.6 is the same as 6/10. And if I draw my whole, I need to break my whole into 10 equal parts. 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And this is telling me 0.6, I'm using 6/10 of the available 10/10. I'm only using 6. So what I'm going to do is shade in 6/10. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, and 6/10. So this part represents my 0.6 is 6 parts out of 10, or it's the same as 6/10. Okay, ready for one more, okay? Here's our last one. If I have 1.2, oh, what does that equal? What do we do there? Well, looking back at our whole, a decimal tells us every whole has 10 equal parts. So a whole can be represented as a fraction as 10/10. Okay, so I can write this one as 10/10. And how many more tenths do I have? I have one whole and 2/10 of another whole. So let's draw this one out. I'm going to first draw my whole. I'm going to draw my 10/10. How many equal parts does one whole have? 10 equal parts. Okay. Now, if I have a whole and a whole is equal to 10/10, how many of my tenths do I shade in to equal one whole? 10. Shade 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10/10. So this equals my whole, which equals 10/10. I also have another whole, but only using 2 parts out of the 10. So let's draw the second whole. Okay. It also has available 10 equal parts. Okay. But it's decimal 2, which is the same as 2/10. So how many parts am I using? Right, only 2/10. This tenth and this tenth. So this part here represents 2/10, or this is my 0.2. You with me? So again, 1.2 is the same as 10/10 and 2 more tenths. It's the same as one whole, 10/10, and another whole, but I'm only using 2/10. So I can write it as 10/10 and 2 more tenths, or one whole and decimal 2. One whole and 2/10 of another whole. Okay, until next time, thanks for watching.